Direct from Foxborough, Massachusetts, the gem of Norfolk County, and taped at the studios of Foxborough Cable Access. It's Foxborough Central, and here's your host, Bob Hickey.
And welcome to another fantastic episode of Foxborough Central. I am Bob Hickey, your host, and I want to thank you for taking the time to join me and my guests as we talk about the people, events, and organizations that make Foxborough truly the gem of Norfolk County. Now, sometimes we have shows about future events, sometimes we have shows about past events, but this show is going to be more about current events, particularly gun violence and how our local student body has reacted to the national outrage over recent shootings that have happened in Florida and other places. So I'm joined today by a number of student leaders of our two local high schools. Foxborough High School, Foxborough Regional Charter School are both well represented here. We'll start off to my right, your left, and Sean McNamara. Sean, how you doing?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm doing great, nice to meet you. And you're a senior at Foxborough High School.
Senior at Foxborough High School.
On the tennis team?
I am on the tennis team, yep. Captain of the tennis team. Yeah.
Captain of the tennis team?
I am captain of the tennis team.
And let's hit the other resume highlights.
I'm also the president of the senior class at Foxborough, as well as the soccer team captain. Yes.
And we are here today to talk about gun violence and how local students are affected, impacted, and maybe trying to make a difference. So,
yes.
National Walkout Day, what was that called?
Yes, National Walkout Day was March 14th, and Foxborough had planned on walking out, but we had a snow day.
We tend to get those here.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we had a pretty bad winter. But we moved it to March 15th, and we walked out for 6 minutes of silence outdoors, and then we moved into the auditorium for 11 minutes of speeches done by students for a total of 17 minutes for the 17 victims that died in Parkland, Florida.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that was a tragedy that was all over the news, and then nationally the student response made headlines, but then as with most things in the news, they move on to today's issues. So what we'd like to do today is maybe dig a little deeper, visit the real issues, and maybe some of the solutions that are hoped for. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Well, let's have at it then. So I'm also joined by Haley Harrison with the Foxborough Regional Charter School. How are you doing, Haley?
Good, how are you?
Doing great. So we talked about 17 minutes of 6 minutes of silence and 11 minutes of speeches at the high school. What did the Foxborough Regional School do?
So we did a little bit differently. So we walked out at 10 a.m., which is what everyone was doing nationally, but ours was also...
Nobody knows we do that.
No, yeah. Ours was the next day as well, because we did have a snow day at our school too. We had a combination of different events. Nicole will probably talk more about that, but we had 17 seconds of silence instead of the 6 minutes, trying to, because we did like different speeches, students, we did honor the victims, just a mixture of a bunch of stuff. And then.
So when you heard the news of the Parkland shooting, what was your initial response?
So we kind of get numb and dulled to it because it happens so often with, I think, like about 20 so far this year, just in 2018. So it's...
And there's smaller ones in Texas. There was the one, and then, but going back to Columbine, where I think it first became a thing, it really has... It's interesting you mentioned that because it has sort of dulled us or inured us to the shock.
It's just something that happens, but we want to change that, make it so it's not just something that happens, something that we can do, we can change it.
So worthy goal. Let's see what Foxborough Regional Charter School did, because you want Nicole to answer this one. So Nicole Soriel, how are you doing? It's very nice to meet you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And what was the charter school's reaction, if you will? What was the agenda?
We were all very much in shock for sure, and I think it hit us all a little bit harder knowing that it was at a high school this time, as opposed to like Sandy Hook happening in elementary school. And back then we were also towards the younger side, and I know I couldn't really comprehend what was going on back then. But this time around, we all just really wanted to do something, so we decided we'd stick to the national 17-minute time for the walkout, but we wanted to involve as many people in the school as possible instead of just having it be an upperclassmen event where people just stood there and watched. So we got a lot of freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors all involved, and We started out with just explaining why we're walking out, what our goals were, what teenagers can do in things like this where legally we don't necessarily have a voice that we can see right away. And we also spent time honoring each of the victims from Parkland. We had some poetry read that some of our students had written. It was a really cool thing.
It was a moving event
school.
also, sounds like.
Yeah.
Now, was this held on school grounds or was this? Okay.
Yeah, we walked outside. The whole thing was outside. It was really cold.
Really cold.
But we stayed outside the whole time in front of the flagpole, like right in front of the main office of the school.
And it was more than just the senior class that participated?
I'd say most of the high school participated, probably around 200 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Impressive. And I'm also joined by my final guest, Gabby Shalkowski. Gabby, thank you so much for coming out. And you are a senior with Foxborough High School. And the Foxborough Regional School had that, and I think you had more of a silence and then indoors. So let's talk a little bit about the specifics of what Foxborough High School's response was.
So at Foxborough High School, most of the students there were pretty passionate that we needed to do something to protest and participate in the student walkout. However, because of the snow, there were obviously some logistic issues, such as the snow day, and then having over a foot of snow on most of the grounds. So to compromise, we took 6 minutes to go and stand out on the entranceway to the high school, where we had silence, as Sean mentioned. And then we also had posters for each of the 17 people who had died, which are now hanging on the walls of our high school. And then after that, we proceeded to go inside, where we had, I think, 4 or 5 speeches of students talking about how it personally affected them. I know one student had known someone who went to the school and fortunately wasn't harmed, but we just talked about what we think we need to do in the future.
Impressive. So, and it sounds as though if there are posters hanging on the walls, that the administration is somewhat supportive of the involvement and the awareness of your student body's response. Is that true?
Yes, our principal, Diana Myers-Pakla, and the assistant principals were very supportive in allowing us to do what we felt was necessary, at the same time not getting too involved and really letting this be a student-led movement.
That's probably the best way. And of course, with student-led, it takes leaders, and we've already hit your resume. And what is your resume? Where are you at with, so you're a senior?
I am the captain of the debate team, the treasurer of the Art National Honor Society, and the vice president of French National Honor Society, and then involved in a couple other clubs.
A couple other clubs. Wow, very impressive. And Nicole, you?
I'm the president of the National Honor Society and the captain of the mock trial team.
The mock trial team. And I suppose that with Foxborough High School being somewhat supportive, if not actively involved from the administration level, that shows support. What was the Foxborough Regional Charter School's response to the student-led initiative?
Our school definitely took a step back. They supported the students talking out and speaking out for what's important to them, but they weren't not supportive, but they also weren't supporting as well. We had some limitations, but they were very easy to get around. We weren't able to put up flyers or anything advertising the walkout itself, but we could put out flyers about gun control and things like that. Okay. So the entire walkout had to be spread around by word of mouth and social media and stuff.
And it sounds like it was.
Yeah.
I think everybody knew.
Yeah.
I don't go to the schools, and I knew. And that's why I'm glad that you're here sharing the story with our folks here at Foxborough Central. And of course, Haley, I've not
Save
going.
the best for last.
I was just going to say something to that, so yes.
So I'm a senior. I am the vice president of the National Honor Society and the president of the executive board at the school, and mock trial captain with Nicole.
Okay, so tell us about executive board. What is that?
So it's a combination of all the student councils. So each grade has a class president, and then the officers from that go to the executive board, where it's basically the vice president, and secretary of the entire school, where we plan school-wide events.
And this would be a school-wide event?
Yeah.
So let's talk about how was the student discussion, since this was a student-led initiative, how did the discussion go down? Was it something there was a lot of debate? Do we, don't we, something more, something less?
So it was a lot of we should do this, and a big thing that we were talking about and trying to figure out is how do we get the information across so it's not just one-sided, trying to be like liberal, conservative, or whatever. It was more just we wanted to get the information out there so people could get opinions on it, make their own decision on whether to walk out or not. So everyone was informed. So it wasn't just everybody else was walking out, I'm going to walk out.
That's a very mature approach.
Yeah.
Good for you. And do you feel as though that message actually made it out, Nicole?
I do think so. We made it a goal to have, we put together little presentations but we didn't want to have like a big assembly because we felt that would be a little impersonal. So we decided to visit classrooms and give this little presentation that just had some statistics, some background about like why people were wearing the color orange on the day of the walkout and things like that. And part of those presentations was also making it really clear that the walkout's not mandatory, that it's definitely in like your choice whether or not you want to participate or not. And we hit almost every classroom, I think, with the presentation. Also, the snow from the week before made that a little bit difficult, but I think we ended up getting through most of them, and those that we didn't get through, they heard about it from their peers, so it was pretty good.
Color orange?
Yes. The color orange is nationally has come to represent the color for the movement against gun violence of all forms, not just school shootings. I think it started in 2015 where a 15-year-old girl was shot accidentally because she was confused for being a member of a rival gang or something. And so everyone that was around her rallied up and started the Wear Orange movement, and that's why the organizers nationally of the walkout that we participated in last week chose to wear orange.
You know, it's interesting you say that, and I'm going to ask you, Sean, about Foxborough High School's response also with the program as well. But you mentioned a member of a rival gang, and we here in Foxborough, as do many small communities, sometimes get the false idea that we're protected against big city problems, and that issues that happen in the news always happen somewhere else. But with Parkland, it's a great example. It was a suburb. It's not a big city. It's a large school, yes, but Sandy Hook certainly is not in the center of a dangerous, or what some would consider to be a dangerous neighborhood. So I think this is a great discussion to have, because really it drives home that not only do we need to be aware, but we also need to be a little accepting of the fact that this can happen anywhere. Mental health issues affect every family in some capacity, and we all share in the responsibility and the opportunity to learn more, do more.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so we are definitely concerned about safety at our school. You know, people say it can't happen here, but I mean, it's happened so many places at this point that arguments like pretty much thrown into the trash. And so right away we decided that we wouldn't have any press or anybody that didn't work at the school or go to the school come in, because all those kids outside at a certain time, you know, people would know how long we'd be out there. It was a national event. And so we were worried about something happening, and I think that's a reason why we were walking out, because we really shouldn't have to worry about, you know, getting shot, being outside, trying to protest gun control. But we totally have to, because things like that definitely happen in today's day and age.
So with the high schools and the charter schools approach, what impact do you think nationally the walkouts make? And then the fair question is, what impact locally do you think it made, and what do you want the continuing message to be? And we'll start over there.
Well, when you look at surveys, you see that the majority of Americans do support some common sense gun reforms, such as not allowing mentally ill people to be able to buy guns, or preventing people from buying guns at firearm gun shows, which is a common loophole. So I think it's clear that most Americans do support gun control, but in order for that support to actually translate into legislature, it's important that we stay politically active, and through protests and our votes, we show that this is an issue that's important to us.
You know, an interesting comment was made that the Constitution, the amendment regarding, Second Amendment regarding ability to bear arms, also protected people from being able to have a cannon. People don't have cannons now. So common sense gun control is not an issue that people should say there's no way, no way, no way. But what is the way?
If there was an answer, I feel like it would have been implemented by now. So
That's a
for
tough
sure,
question,
there's
isn't it?
a lot of different approaches to it. Personally, I think any step towards gun reform is a step in the right direction. And there's like I feel like there's really tangible things, like steps that could be taken, such as taking background checks a little bit more seriously than they have been in the past, and looking not just for criminal records, but also for history of mental illness, or just speaking with doctors or something like that. Also, I don't really see a reason for such powerful weapons to be on the market for anyone to buy. I 100% support anyone's right to have a gun, but I don't think anything more than a handgun is really necessary for if the reason you have it is to protect yourself, which is generally the argument. So I feel like those are just some steps that could be taken in the right direction, and I don't feel like that's really taking away anyone's Second Amendment rights at the same time.
Important thing about this is updating of our laws. We need to stay current. Like, we have laws that are like so old they're no longer relevant, but they're still on the books. We need to be getting these laws, updating them so they're practical in current society.
Now, and that's a very good point, because laws on the books are passed, and unfortunately, necessity is the mother of invention. Well, tragic events are often the cause for new legislation. Yeah. So, what is the current flavor of the movement as, legislation response? Have we spoken to our local legislators? Have we spoken with our national legislators?
Yeah, we actually, one of the students at Foxborough, Kendall Millender, drafted a letter after the walkout and sent it to, I think, Joe Kennedy, our representative, talking about what we did at Foxborough, why we are walking out, and just like to call for gun control, like we were talking about the old laws. I think the Second Amendment was adopted in 1791, and the technology back then, I think a gun could probably fire like maybe 3 rounds in a minute, and now we have like assault rifles which can fire at 600 rounds per minute, and so those laws just, I don't even get how somebody could think that could stand up for like an assault rifle. And so I think people sometimes there's misconceptions that gun control means get rid of all guns, which I don't think that. I don't know if you guys do. But I mean, gun control is just controlling guns. The stronger the gun, like the stronger the regulations. And so I think that's definitely
you raise an excellent point, because the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and give the foundation of our country, but it's not the laws that interpret the Constitution. Yeah. So gun control doesn't do away with the Second Amendment. Gun control interprets how the Second Amendment is implemented. And so that's an excellent point. Yeah. And the legislature can do something. Of course, there's a check and balance. The Supreme Court can always intervene when the legislature oversteps or the president oversteps. And so there's that control in place. But it really does come down to people making a movement and then legislation being introduced to enact change. So what is the immediate change that we can do?
I think on a local level, changes could definitely be implemented. One important thing to focus on is actual implementation and execution of policies. So in Parkland, we saw that the shooter had been reported many times by a school and his peers that he was a threat, and the FBI and local police had visited him several times. However, they hadn't taken it a step further to get him some counseling or to monitor him and prevent him from getting a gun. So in those instances, there were some policies on the books. However, they weren't properly implemented, which is something that local schools and communities and departments can implement right now.
That's interesting, and also we talk about that, and I suppose one argument would be made against saying, well, aren't we based on isn't our government and our justice system based on a presumed innocent until proven guilty concept? And if that's the case, then how do we justify taking away somebody's right to bear arms or have certain weapons if just because they have a mental illness, and mental illness to be truly destigmatized and understand it and embrace it for the issue that it is, as opposed to a voodoo thing that we don't understand? It's such a tough question. You had mentioned earlier that it's such a difficult issue to address, because really there is no universal truth. Mental illness takes on so many different characteristics and manifestations that how do we come to some sort of conclusion?
Honestly,
I know I'm asking you a question there's no answer to. If there was, as you say, it would already been done.
Yeah.
But I think
This is more of a roundtable
it's-
discussion.
Yeah.
Sorry, everybody out there at Foxborough Cable Access. So I'm having a great time talking about this. So I'm glad you're joining us, but I'm really kind of curious what your thoughts are.
No, I do think it's definitely difficult to approach it because there's so many aspects of like people's beliefs on mental illness and people's beliefs on arms and things like that. But I really don't think that postponing someone's purchase of a firearm is the same thing as preventing them from getting it entirely. And perhaps like one approach could be, we see that you have X mental illness. Maybe right now it's not possible for you to get it, but we want to provide you with the help necessary. And I feel often things are just written off as, oh, they have a mental illness, sucks for them, when I think as a society it's our responsibility to help people who need help in all circumstances, mental illnesses included. And so if we approach it in a way where you kind of put the gun part of it on pause and you seek, I think personally mental illness is, it affects so many people who don't even speak out because of the stigma against it. And so if we go and we make a lot of steps in that direction, fixing that, then I do think that the gun issue will also get better simultaneously.
That's a great answer. And so I'm going to hit you with the next one, privacy laws, because I know that with the shooter in Parkland, there have been a couple of reports that he had posted some very troubling posts on social media, and yet law enforcement is often precluded or prevented from truly identifying, because social media, as we know, keyboard cowboys can always be anonymous, and free speech is something that we hold dear in this society, and yet those are clear warning signs that something bad was brewing in this fellow's head. And so how do we get around that? Because do we all use social media? And we all like to think that we have the right to say what we like. And yet, do we want the police coming in and taking our posts and using those words against us when maybe we're just expressing opinion? It's such a hard conversation to have.
I think there's definitely a certain point to where you post things on social media, you need to be able to like be confident about what you're saying, and you wouldn't want to post something you wouldn't say in real life. Like, it's just because you're on the internet doesn't mean it's not you.
Words mean something.
So yeah. And I know he specifically posted something on a YouTube video and his name was in it, but I feel like that was identifying him, and they showed that to the police and nothing got done about it because of the laws. I feel like in certain circumstances and like by a case-by-case basis, there should be exceptions or some amendment to make that possible.
I feel like public safety needs to be put first. There needs to be give and take. If someone's saying they're going to do bad things and you're putting like an entire school in danger, like you need to kind of like step back and look at the situation. Like, yes, you're allowed to post what you want, but I mean, this threat should be taken seriously, and to protect like all the other students at that school, I think like whoever posted it should definitely be looked into.
And that wasn't the first thing.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just like, it just can't be the first thing. Like, I understand privacy laws and you just can't take that, but there was other signs and additional evidence.
His comment was something along the lines of, I'm going to become the best school shooter. So if I had walked into my principal's office and said that, I know immediately our school resource officer would have been called down, my parents would have been called in, there would have been significant action taken, and I feel like saying it online makes no difference. Similar action should be taken in response.
And then we get to the overwhelming number of posts that are made on social media that maybe people are bragging, maybe people are not serious. And then I always think back to, I'm a little bit older than you folks, and at my school we, maybe always around exam time, but would end up with false alarms, the fire drills, and 2-3 times a day. In fact, I think at Parkland they had a fire drill that morning, and then when the fire alarm went off that afternoon, people didn't respond as much. They thought it was just another drill. So we get, again, a near it is probably too soft a term to use, but how often can we respond to false alarms and the public safety not being able to go forward because of privacy rights and social media posts that maybe aren't actionable? It's just such a dilemma. And it's great that you're looking at this and maybe bringing a new approach and a new eye-opening awareness to it, but it's such a big problem.
I would say that it starts with the schools and the families. If a student is going on social media and saying things or making potential threats about violent actions, that's obviously completely inappropriate. And if a child is doing that or a young person is doing that, there's obviously going to be a deeper issue in most cases. So I think it's important that the families and the communities and the schools, one, work to prevent that by providing care and aid for the student before it gets to that point, and then two, being watchful and mindful of a student who's showing some risks.
Early intervention. What a good thing. And if only we had the ability to do that across the board, then these tragic incidents wouldn't happen quite as often. I've been joined by Gabby Shakulski, Nicole Soriel, Haley Harrison, and Sean McNamara. I thank you all for joining us. We are so close to being out of time. I'm going to give each school an opportunity, kind of like debate. I'm going to give each school an opportunity for a closing statement. So to my left, Foxborough Regional.
No, I would just like to say I'm really proud of all the students that participated at our school, both actually people that participated and people that didn't, because everyone stuck to what they believed in. And I think it's really important that all of us as teenagers understand that we're not silent, we have a voice. And I just hope, I talked about this at the walkout, but I just hope that this walkout is the first step of several steps towards standing up for what you believe in and like a lifetime of advocacy for what you think is important. And just because you're young doesn't mean you can't do anything.
Yeah. And something else we did is we had 2 different letters, well actually 3. We had students write to people who were doing things about gun control, thanking them, and then we also wrote letters to legislators looking for more change, more gun control, just change.
Powerful. In the high school?
Yeah, I was immensely proud of like everybody who walked out. It's tough to stand up for what you believe in. You know, high schoolers can be some of the most judgmental people. And so definitely like we had about 200 people walk out, which I wasn't expecting. I was very proud of how quiet it was during the silence. And I was especially proud of the kids that stepped up and talked and delivered speeches. That takes a lot of bravery. I don't know if you want to say anything else, but.
I would just say to young people that change only happens when you demand it, and it's important to continue the passion you feel and bring that into the elections when you can vote and further protests.
An excellent point. Change needs to happen, and when it happens by people who vote, that's how it happens. Of that, there can be no debate, and awareness is the important thing. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Guests from both Foxborough High School and Foxborough Regional School. You never met each other before this.
No.
But it shows that we have a unified message of change and hope. So thank you so much for taking the time to join me, and thank you everybody at Foxborough. On behalf of all of us here at Foxborough Cable Access, we hope you have a fantastic day. Take care.